Mr. President, on the question of North Korea, the country feels that a crisis is coming. Some lawmakers, Lindsey Graham among them, have almost described the situation as inevitably leading to war. I don't want to ask you if you think it's inevitable. What I do want to ask you is, as President of the United States, would you tolerate a nuclearized North Korea that is contained and deterred, but still nuclear? Or would it have to abandon nuclear weapons, and would military action on the part of the United States be one of the options necessary to achieve that goal?
Military action would certainly be an option. Is it inevitable? Nothing's inevitable. It would be great if something else could be worked out. We would have to look at all of the details, all of the facts, but we've had presidents for 25 years now. They've been talking, and the day after an agreement is reached, new work begins in North Korea, continuation on nuclear. So I would prefer not going the route of the military, but it's something certainly that could happen. Our military has never been stronger. We are in a position now, and you know the new orders, you see the numbers just like I see the new numbers. It's been tens of billions of dollars more in investment. And each day new equipment is delivered, new and beautiful equipment, the best in the world, the best anywhere in the world, by far. Hopefully we're not going to have to use it on North Korea. If we do use it on North Korea, it will be a very sad day for North Korea. Do you have a question for the Emir?
Follow-up, is it acceptable for you as president for North Korea to be nuclearized but contained and deterred? Is that a strategy
we're going to see what it is? I don't
would
negotiate
like to prefer?
with you. No, I'm not negotiating with you. Maybe we'll have a chance to negotiate with somebody else, but I don't put my negotiations on the table, unlike past administrations. I don't talk about them. But I can tell you that North Korea is behaving badly, and it's got to stop.
Michael Singh is back with us. So, Michael, let's talk some more about North Korea. Some of the suggestions as to how we deal with them. Number one, diplomacy. So what's the chance of that working?
Well, there are really no silver bullets here at all, Heather. I mean, we heard the Australian Prime Minister say war would be catastrophic, but diplomacy isn't an easy answer here either, because what people have suggested is sort of a freeze-for-freeze deal, that we could get North Korea to freeze its tests and maybe even its production of nuclear missiles in exchange for something from the United States. And the question is, in exchange for what from the United States? Because the very things they might want us to give up are the sorts of policies that we would want to put in place to deter North Korea, like military exercises or boosting our military capabilities in the region. And frankly, we could expect North Korea to cheat on any such arrangement anyway.
Yeah, well, let's talk about a preemptive strike. No one wants that. This is what Fox News analyst Ralph Peters had to say in an op-ed. He wrote that, you know, amongst other things, better 1 million dead North Koreans than 1,000 dead Americans. The fundamental reason our government exists is to protect our people and our territory. But the dangers of a preemptive strike are what? That he could immediately hit South Korea.
Well, I think that most Americans would find that logic immoral that was laid out in that op-ed, but it's also not effective, I think, because at the end of the day, a war, there is no real surgical strike option, I think, available to the president that could reliably take out North Korea's nuclear and missile threat without, first, tremendous casualties in South Korea and perhaps elsewhere in the region, second, tremendous economic devastation, and then third, the risk that that war would actually spread from Korea to other parts of Asia, which would be perhaps a worst-case outcome for the United States.
It would just be horrific. Michael Singh, thank you very much for joining us and sticking around with us as well. Thank you.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin has warned of a global catastrophe if military tensions with North Korea continue to increase. Mr. Putin also dismissed the value of imposing further sanctions on Pyongyang, saying the country's leadership would rather eat grass than abandon its nuclear program. Meanwhile, South Korea has been holding more live fire drills and has been staging a major naval exercise off the country's east coast. A South Korean commander said the North's forces would be buried at sea in the event of a further provocation. The country's president says he is open to dialogue with the North, but now is not the time for talks. China, the North's main ally, is still urging caution and has called for a return to negotiations. Our correspondent John Sudworth is in Dandong on the border between China and North Korea.
The Chinese city of Dandong is a very good place to contemplate China's position in the North Korean nuclear crisis. If we pan across the river, you can see just how close the two countries are at this point. They are connected by that iron bridge behind me, and almost all of North Korea's trade in goods, as well as its vital crude oil supply, flows across this border. You can see an antiquated North Korean power station on the other side there, a sign of just how dilapidated its energy infrastructure is. Donald Trump's argument, of course, is that China could, if it wanted to, simply force North Korea into submission by turning off this lifeline. But when you look at this proximity, you can see why the Chinese leadership see things very differently indeed. Their fear is that pushing North Korea towards regime collapse will bring chaos and instability, factional infighting, possibly even war, right up against this border. And that is why Beijing is insisting that it will not contemplate a total trade embargo. It will not contemplate talk of military options. All it wants to see is a return to dialogue. And that has been its position all along.
John Sudworth, well, we can get more on the comments from President Putin, who's speaking in China this morning. We can join our Moscow correspondent, Sarah Rainsford. Sarah, Vladimir Putin has, like China, dismissed putting further sanctions on North Korea. What is Moscow's view of what would be the way forward?
He has, that's right. Russia's position quite similar to that of China. In fact, Russia and China have put forward a roadmap for resolving the crisis on the Korean Peninsula. And President Putin has made clear that whilst Russia sees the latest nuclear test by North Korea as provocative, as he put it, and he's condemned those, he doesn't think that sanctions are the way forward. In fact, he said that the North Korean leadership would prefer to eat grass than to end their nuclear program. So sanctions, he said, were a dead-end road. But also he was very strong, Mr. Putin was very strong in terms of what he called the military hysteria that he said was being whipped up over the crisis on the Korean Peninsula, saying that that was a road to nowhere, that this kind of rhetoric needs to end, and that all sides need to return to the negotiation table. Now, as Russia sees it, that means all sides, including Pyongyang. It's like China, pushing for a return to talks, and says the only way to resolve this crisis is through diplomacy. But it's difficult at this point to know exactly what influence Russia can bring to bear on the situation. Certainly it has very important historic ties with Pyongyang, but in terms of economic leverage or political leverage even, it's difficult at this point to know how much pressure Russia can actually exert on North Korea.
Thank you very much, Sarah.